They don't call it a prison, not officially. The brass prefers terms like containment facility, research annex, or, most commonly, simply the vault. But we guards, the ones who walk these echoing corridors day in and day out, we know what it is. It's a tomb for things that shouldn't exist, things scraped from the bleeding edges of reality, things dredged up from nightmares humanity wasn't meant to have. My name is Azrael, though that's likely not the one on my birth certificate. Names tend to fade down here, like everything else. I'm a senior guard, which mostly means I've survived longer than the others, seen more rotations fail, more protocols bend and break under pressure that isn't entirely physical. The vault itself, it's old, older than any records suggest, dug deep beneath forgotten earth, far from any map that matters. It's not just concrete and steel. There are sections walled with materials that hum faintly, obsidian-like surfaces that seem to drink the light, and metal alloys that defy analysis. Sometimes the walls weep a dark, viscous fluid that smells faintly of ozone and something else, something organic and wrong. Other times, you swear the corridors shift when you're not looking. You map your patrol route meticulously, count the junctions, the access panels. But then, one day, there's a turn where none existed before, or a familiar hallway simply ends. Management calls it structural settling. We call it the vault playing games. You feel it watching you sometimes. Not the cameras. Those are predictable. This is different. A weight in the air, a prickling on your skin, the sense that the very geometry around you is holding its breath, waiting. The silence down here isn't empty. It's full, pressing, listening. Control is the watchword, the mantra chanted in briefings, plastered on safety posters that peel in the recycled air. But it's a flimsy shield against the kind of chaos we contain. Our protocols are desperate, reactive things, patched together after the last incident, always one step behind whatever crawls out of the theoretical next. The assets, that's what the scientists call them, not inmates. They haven't broken laws. They've broken reality itself. They are glitches in the fabric of existence, paradoxes given form, nightmares made manifest. We don't rehabilitate. We merely contain, observe, and pray the containment holds. Each asset is a unique brand of horror, requiring tailored procedures that often feel woefully inadequate, like trying to hold back the tide with a teacup. Take the flicker, for instance, asset designation F07. It flickers, phasing between dimensions, sometimes just a shimmer in the air, sometimes a half-formed silhouette of impossible angles. Being near it, it wears you down. Starts with nausea, a headache behind the eyes. Then the short-term memory goes. You forget why you entered the observation booth, forget the checklist in your hand. Stay too long and the erosion begins. Hair thins, fingernails crack, skin goes pale and almost translucent. Sanity frays like old rope. It's contained by temporal stabilizers, massive humming rings that consume obscene amounts of power and are constantly on the verge of overload. More than one guard assigned to F07 maintenance just stopped existing mid-shift, vanished. The stabilizers barely keep it anchored here. Then there's Subject Null, SNO1, tall, featureless, humanoid, mostly, made of something blacker than pitch that just eats light. Our standard rounds flatten against it like spitballs. Heavy ordnance, barely chips it. It doesn't seem to feel pain, doesn't react much at all, just exists and absorbs, slowly, almost imperceptibly. The reinforced plating of its magnetic suspension chamber gets thinner. The official line is material fatigue. The rumor among the guards is that Null is consuming its prison. We just keep pumping power into the U magnets, hoping it's enough. The artificer, A1 to 13, used to be human. A brilliant bioengineer who went too far, blurring the lines between flesh and machine until he became something else. Give him scrap metal, discarded electronics, even organic waste, and he'll build things. Horrible, skittering contraptions of wire and bone, cameras grafted onto insect legs, things that whisper with stolen vocal cords. We keep him in a controlled environment, feeding him safe scrap. But sometimes the things he makes show a spark of independent thought, coordinating, testing the cell boundaries. He's locked down tight, but the ideas he puts into his creations, they worry the psych team more than his physical threat. We have the digger, DGOR-4. It doesn't dig through rock, it digs through space, creates tunnels of pure, non-Euclidean void that shimmer and lead elsewhere. Where? Nobody who's fallen in has ever come back to say. Containing it is a nightmare, a constantly shifting matrix of high-energy fields designed to collapse any nascent tunnel instantly. It requires constant monitoring, constant power adjustment. One flicker, one miscalculation, and it could open a door right out of the vault, or worse, let something else in. And the Echo, E77, victim of a temporal experiment gone sideways. He's unstuck in time, flickering between moments. You see him standing still, then suddenly overlaid with a dozen after-images of himself, moving, screaming, laughing, all at once. His voice comes in fragments, echoes of past and future conversations, overlapping into nonsense. His cell is a temporal buffer zone, constantly adjusted by the chronotex, but sometimes the adjustments slip. And for a terrifying second, you might see your own echo standing beside him. These are just a few. There are whispers of things, in the deeper levels, things we aren't cleared to know about. Things the vault seems to hold closer, tighter. The protocols for them are spoken only in hushed tones by the highest command. The sheer weight of containing so much impossibility strains everything. The hum of the power conduits is a constant reminder of the energy needed to keep reality stitched together down here. The recycled air always tastes stale, tinged with ozone and something metallic, like old blood. Every guard carries the weight, the long hours, the isolation, the constant, low-level dread that gnaws at the edges of your mind. We see things in the monitors, hear things over the comms, feel things in the oppressive silence that make the official reports look like children's stories. The vault demands vigilance, demands adherence to routine, because routine is the only dam we have against the flood. But lately, the dam has been cracking. More frequent power fluctuations, strange energy signatures spiking without explanation, the weeping from the walls in Sector Gamma becoming thicker, almost like tar, and the corridors, more guards reporting disorientation, routes changing mid-patrol. Management increases security drills, issues new containment directives, but it feels like putting plasters on a ruptured artery. The vault is old, and it feels tired. Or maybe hungry. We operate under layers of secrecy so thick they suffocate. Need to know is the first commandment. Information is compartmentalized to the extreme. Even knowing about the assets I've mentioned probably puts me on some watch list. But the truth is, nobody knows the full picture. Maybe not even the director. The vault guards its own secrets, perhaps even from those who think they run it. This place isn't just holding monsters. Maybe it is one. My transfer orders came through yesterday. long-term observation duty. Habitat 7, Asset Serafina. The official reason was anomalous psionic and energetic signatures requiring continuous monitoring. Plausible enough, given the nature of the assets. But the way Section Chief Thorne avoided eye contact when he handed me the datapad, the slight tremor in his hand, that told a different story. Something was wrong with Serafina, or with her containment, and they were sending me in to watch. The fuse burn. The descent to Habitat 7 is longer than most. Deeper. The elevator hums a discordant tune, each level marked by thicker blast doors and increasingly complex identification scanners. Retinal, voice pattern, subdermal implant ping, even a quick psych eval questionnaire flashed on a screen before the final door hissed open. Standard procedure down here is paranoia, elevated to an art form. Thorne's unease had been contagious. My own pulse was a frantic drum against my ribs. The air in this sublevel felt different too. Colder, unnaturally still, carrying a faint scent like static electricity before a lightning strike. Habitat 7 wasn't like the usual brutalist, concrete cells or high-tech containment fields. It was designed to soothe, or perhaps deceive. A large, circular room, walls glowing with a soft, ambient white light. Minimalist furniture, a small bed, a table, a chair. All smooth, seamless white material. No sharp edges. But the longer you looked, the stranger it became. The light wasn't constant. It seemed to breathe, shifting imperceptibly in hue, sometimes a cooler blue, sometimes a warmer, almost sickly yellow, seemingly in response to her. The furniture, too, looked almost fluid. Not moving, but giving the impression of potential movement, like solidified mercury. And the toys scattered on the floor. They weren't dolls or blocks. They were intricate, geometric shapes, made of a shifting, iridescent material. Tetrahedrons that seemed to contain too many angles. Spheres that reflected light in ways that made your eyes water. Complex lattices that looked like frozen glitches in reality. She wasn't playing with them when I entered the observation booth, just sitting on the bed, legs crossed, staring at the wall opposite the one-way mirror I now stood behind. Serafina, Asset, SPHI-01. Physically, she looked about 10 years, old. Pale skin, dark, neatly cut hair, simple white clothes, deceptively normal. Except for the eyes, too large, too dark, and holding an unnerving depth, like looking down a well that had no bottom. The briefing file was thick, but frustratingly vague. Class Omega Psionic Entity. Reality-altering potential. Scope unknown. Presumed catastrophic. Manifestation triggered by emotional distress. Primary containment protocol. Maintain baseline emotional stability via simulated environment and controlled interaction. Simulated environment. That was Habitat 7. Controlled interaction. That was my job now. Just watch. Report any deviations, any sign of distress, any fluctuation in the ambient energy readings that spiked constantly on my console. The observation booth was standard. Reinforced plasteel, one-way mirror, environmental controls separate from the habitat. Panic button linked directly to rapid response, and, presumably, some kind of final containment measure I didn't want to think about. But even here, the wrongness seeped in. The silence wasn't just quiet. It felt absorbed. The air hummed not with machinery, but with a low, almost sub-audible thrum that resonated in my teeth. Why me? Why this long stint? Senior guards usually handle coordination, training newbies, overseeing critical systems. Observation duty like this, especially for a Class Omega, was usually rotated frequently to minimize exposure. Unless exposure was the point. Unless they needed someone who wouldn't crack easily, someone who had seen enough down here to maybe recognize the really subtle signs before it was too late. Or maybe they just needed a pair of eyes they could trust when the inevitable happened. Thorne's averted gaze came back to me. He knew something. They all knew something was coming. The first shift was uneventful, deceptively so. Serafina barely moved. She ate the nutrient paste delivered through a sealed slot, drank the purified water, used the integrated sanitation unit. She picked up one of the impossible toys, turned it over in her hands for an hour, her expression unreadable, then set it down gently. The energy readings remained elevated, but stable. The ambient light stayed a soft, neutral white. The walls didn't weep. The corridors outside hadn't, to my knowledge, rearranged themselves. But the feeling didn't leave. The sense of immense, dormant power held in check by... what? A sterile room? Carefully filtered stimuli? It felt like balancing a nuclear warhead on a pin. The protocols felt insultingly inadequate. The briefing mentioned her biological relatives were the actors in the now decommissioned Smallhaven simulation, a fact that sent a chill down my spine. They'd built an entire fake town for her, a Truman Show from hell, and now she was in this white box. What had happened in Smallhaven to necessitate this change? The file was heavily redacted on that point. I checked the seals on my observation suit again, a pointless gesture. If she decided to unleash whatever she was, a suit wouldn't make a difference. I settled in for the long haul, eyes fixed on the small figure in white, trying to ignore the hum in my teeth and the feeling that the walls themselves were listening along with me. The initial incident wasn't a sudden explosion. It was the slow, dawning realization that I was locked in a room watching a godchild have a potential tantrum, while the building holding us all together was quietly falling apart around us. The DA quiet before the storm. The shifts blurred into one another. Time loses meaning in the vault, measured only by the guard rotations and the automated delivery of nutrient paste. Days, maybe weeks, passed in the sterile confines of the observation booth, staring through the one-way mirror at Serafina. Her routine remained unnervingly simple. Sleep, wake, eat, stare, sometimes interact listlessly with the bizarre geometric toys. The iridescent tetrahedrons seemed to spin with unseen facets when glimpsed peripherally. The spheres sometimes showed distorted reflections of things not present in the room. I logged it all meticulously, though my reports felt increasingly futile. The subtle wrongness of Habitat 7 became more pronounced. One cycle, the water dispenser suddenly ejected steaming hot vapor instead of liquid, fogging the interior before returning to normal moments later. Serafina didn't react. Another time, I watched her shadow on the wall detach itself, stretch, impossibly long and thin, then snap back into place as if nothing had happened. She merely blinked. The ambient light began to pulse more noticeably, shifting from pale blue to an angry violet when the comms crackled with status updates from other sectors, then settling back to white when silence resumed. It was as if the room itself was wired into her subconscious, reacting to stimuli she wasn't consciously acknowledging. The comms chatter became a growing source of anxiety. Maintenance teams were reporting accelerated decay on the containment fields for the digger. Material integrity is degrading faster than projected models, one clipped voice reported, sounding strained. We're patching, but the void pressure, it's increasing. Then came reports from Subject Null's sector. Loud, booming impacts against the chamber walls, not unusual, but the frequency was escalating. Energy readings within containment are spiking erratically, another tech stated, his voice tight. The magnetic field is holding, but the power draw is becoming critical. We might need to divert auxiliary power. Then, the crying walls in Sector Gamma. What started as occasional weeping turned into a steady trickle, then a flow. Teams sent to investigate reported the substance was thicker, darker, and corrosive to standard equipment. One guard swore he heard whispers emanating from the flow, fragmented sentences in a language no one recognized. Each report sent a fresh wave of cold dread through me. The vault wasn't just old, it was actively failing. The systems, the structure, the very materials seemed stressed to their breaking point. Was it Seraphina's presence, her growing power causing this? Or was the vault itself somehow unwell, its own ancient systems failing, and Seraphina merely reacting to it? The moment of chilling confirmation came during a period of intense quiet from Seraphina. She hadn't moved for hours, just sitting cross-legged on her bed, facing the mirror. The comms crackled again, a panicked report from the Artificer's sector. Containment breach. I repeat, containment breach. One of the constructs, it's breached the inner perimeter. It's repurposing the guard. The transmission cut to screams and static. My blood ran cold. I gripped the console, my mind racing. Repurposing the guard? What does that even mean? Suddenly, Seraphina's head snapped up. Her dark, bottomless eyes locked onto the mirror, onto me. A small, almost pitying smile touched her lips. Her voice, unnervingly calm and clear, didn't come through the speakers. It bloomed directly inside my skull. The Artificer is getting creative again, isn't he, Azrael? Making new friends from old ones. You always worried about his little projects. I froze, unable to breathe, unable to think. She knew my thoughts, my specific fears triggered by the comms report I'd just heard. The air in the booth felt thick, crushing. She continued, her mental voice soft, but carrying an immense weight. And the digger just wants to go home. Wherever, that is. Can you blame it? This place is so tight. Her eyes drifted away from me, looking inward. The thing inside me, it used to just sleep. Now it listens. It hears the vault groaning. It hears the others calling out. It's hungry, Azrael. The ambient light in her room pulsed rapidly now, cycling through jarring shades of crimson and deep indigo. Can't you hear them? They're getting louder. They want out. My hand hovered over the panic button uselessly. What could rapid response do against this? What final measure could possibly contain a being who could read my mind and whose mere presence seemed to be unraveling the facility around us? The sense of isolation was absolute. I was trapped, a spectator to the prelude of annihilation. The professional detachment I'd cultivated over years in the vault shattered, leaving only raw, primal fear. She wasn't just an asset anymore. She was a countdown clock, and the entire vault was the bomb she was ticking inside. The subtle distortions in the habitat were practice runs. The instability in the other sectors wasn't coincidence. It was all connected, a symphony of decay orchestrated or amplified by the entity in the White Room. And she knew I knew. The klaxon hit like a physical blow. Not the standard alert, not even the urgent sector breach warning. This was the Omega Protocol alarm. a sound I'd only ever heard in simulations, a brain-drilling shriek designed to convey absolute, irreversible catastrophe. It echoed from the facility speakers, vibrating through the very structure of the vault, a death knell for the fragile illusion of control we'd maintained for so long. Simultaneously, the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in. A pulsating blood-red glare that fought with the chaotic strobing now erupting from Habitat 7. My comms unit exploded into a cacophony of pure terror. Overlapping shouts, weapon fire, the heavy thud of containment ordnance, desperate screams cut off mid-syllable, inhuman roars that defied any known biology, the tearing sound of reinforced metal giving way, and then, sector by sector, chilling static silence. Flicker containment, failing. Field collapse, imminent. Null has breached. It's just walking through the walls. The digger's tunnel is expanding. Oh God, it's not empty. Artificer's constructs are loose on level theta. They're singing. Inside Habitat 7, reality had completely surrendered. The walls weren't just rippling. They flowed like liquid mercury, reflecting the strobing, impossible colors. Magenta, chartreuse, ultraviolet black, in nauseating patterns. The floor buckled and warped, sections momentarily turning to bubbling tar before snapping back to solid, only to dissolve again elsewhere. The minimalist furniture wasn't just floating. It twisted and elongated into grotesque parodies of itself, before shattering into dust motes that hung suspended in the swirling chaos. And Serafina. She hung in the epicenter, untouched, serene, floating effortlessly a meter above the churning floor, her simple white clothes undisturbed. But her eyes, they blazed with pure, white-hot energy, twin stars burning in the dimness, illuminating the horrifying disintegration around her. A smile played on her lips, not childish glee, but ancient, terrifying amusement. The calm eye of a hurricane made of broken physics. She turned her head slowly, the movement unnaturally smooth amidst the violence, and her incandescent gaze locked onto my observation booth window. The reinforced plasteel groaned under an unseen pressure, hairline fractures spider-webbing across its surface. Then, her voice. It wasn't just in my head this time. It boomed through the comms unit, layered over the dying screams and the growing static, echoing with 1,000 overlapping whispers, yet chillingly clear. Time to play. The words hit me with the force of a shockwave, rattling my bones, freezing, the scream in my throat. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, a declaration that the rules had changed, that the game was over, and something far older and more terrifying was about to begin. The floor beneath my feet vibrated violently as something immense impacted a nearby corridor. The Omega alarm shrieked its final dying note before cutting out, leaving only the sound of distant destruction and the soft, terrible hum emanating from the unraveling room before me. Paralysis. My body refused to obey. My training, years of drills, contingency plans, all useless static in my mind, drowned out by the sheer, overwhelming wrongness of what was unfolding. The observation window, my only barrier, crazed further, thin cracks racing across the surface, like black lightning against the impossible light show within Habitat 7. Serafina's glowing eyes remained fixed on me, her serene smile widening fractionally. The comms were mostly dead now, just bursts of static, punctuated by sounds that clawed at the edges of sanity. A wet, tearing noise from the direction of the biocontainment wing, a low, guttural chanting that seemed to come from the deepest levels, resonating through the floor plates. a rhythmic, heavy scraping, getting closer. I fumbled for the emergency report button on my console, my fingers numb and clumsy, shaking too hard to make proper contact. What would I even report? Asset. SPHI-01 confirms facility-wide containment failure, appears pleased. Reality integrity failing. Request immediate? Nothing? It was arrogance. Utter, suicidal arrogance to think we could ever truly contain these things. We weren't jailers. We were curators in a museum of cosmic horrors, dusting the exhibits, while pretending they couldn't break the glass. And the vault? Was it just a failing structure, or was it something more? An entity shedding its skin, letting its collection loose? The thought was paralyzing. Maybe the weeping walls weren't a sign of decay, but of anticipation. The scraping sound stopped. Right outside my booth door. A heavy, wet thump reverberated through the plasteel, then another. Something large was out there. Or perhaps it wasn't outside anymore. Perhaps the corridor itself had ceased to be a reliable concept. I could smell it now, even through the suit's filters. An acrid stench, like burnt copper and spoiled meat. I finally managed to slam my palm onto the console, not caring about the report button anymore, just a desperate, futile gesture. The lights in the booth flickered violently, casting my own terrified reflection onto the cracking window, a distorted mirror image against Seraphina's radiant, smiling face. The last thing I heard before the metal of the booth door began to buckle inwards with a deafening screech wasn't a scream or a roar from the comms. It was a soft giggle, impossibly close, echoing not just in my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. A child's giggle, welcoming the end of everything.